an 811 workshop. Y'all know this is a new program for us. So this workshop is going to operate very similar to a lot of the different things we do, which is it's interactive. It's a chance for you to ask every question that you have. We fully expect that we're going to learn as much from this workshop from you all as you're going to learn from us today. First thing I wanted to do is get an idea of who's here. So, owners, raise your hand. Okay, so we got a lot of owners. Property managers. Okay, that's great. And anybody else? Compliance, right? Okay, for companies. Okay, so that's a nice kind of different role for everybody to learn a little bit about this program. So property managers, I have a couple questions for you. How many of you have worked with Section 8 before, project-based rental assistance? Have contracts, USDA rental assistance. Do you like it? Yep. No? Yes? Harder than just something you have to get used to, right? Give me a good thing. So I want you all to keep that in mind as we go through this workshop, because really that's what 811 is. It's rental assistance. And I think that almost all of the property managers that meet DCA requirements to be property managers have probably at some time dealt with some form of rental assistance. So this may be a little bit different, and I know it's new, but I think you're going to find when we start walking through the process, it's not near as bad as some of you may think. How many of you, when you come in here with the idea that maybe DCA won't make you do this? That's right. Abby, I know you're thinking that.
No, we're here. We're going to be made to do this.
Yeah. So I wanted to give you just a little background about why DCA is doing this particular program, because it really fits into the larger strategy of how we're serving persons with disabilities in Georgia. Y'all have heard of the Olmstead decision, right? You're all aware, we've been talking fair housing, some of the changes that have come down over the past couple of years regarding housing with persons with disabilities. The Olmstead decision is an interesting decision. Some of you may not know that Olmstead, actually, we're the home state of the Olmstead decision. That was a court case, even though you hear it nationally, that actually was, the decision was here in Georgia. So we are ground zero for Olmstead. And from that Olmstead decision that really talked about how we serve persons with disabilities in Georgia, whether people need to be in certain settings or living a certain way in order for the state of Georgia to provide services to them, there's been a lot of guidance and a lot of regulations that have changed over the past 5 years. DCA operates under a policy now, which is in accordance with the Justice Department mandate, that says we are not going to provide housing to persons with disabilities in a congregate setting, that all of the persons that we serve with disabilities from a certain point forward, we're looking at how those, how our services, how our housing can be integrated into our existing housing. That persons with disabilities really have a right to live just like everybody else. They have to have access to community services. They need to have the ability to interact with people without disabilities. They need to have the opportunity to do better in their life, and that we're not going to house them in mental institutions. We're not going to make requirements for them in order to obtain services in the state of Georgia, and that all of our housing will eventually, hopefully, have units where persons with disabilities can move, and that they're not prisoners of project-based rental assistance or some kind of services in a congregate housing in a location that DCA decides it should be built. So we've been working for a long time on our policies. A lot of you have probably seen our strategic plan. And for the last couple of years, our qualified allocation plan has had point provision that I would say everybody has uniformly checked that box and taken the point that says basically, if we ask for volunteers, we're raising our hands and we're going to participate in the 811 program. Now, we've been doing it for so long, I think sometimes the industry was like, well, we check that box and we're never coming to you. Well, we're coming to you starting right now. And we have approximately 500 vouchers, Patrick, 500 vouchers right now. We have won 2 grants, and we are aggressively pursuing units to place persons with disabilities under the 811 program. If you have a project that is coming up to start leasing, you will be asked to sign a RAC agreement. You're going to hear what all these different terms mean today. But we fully intend to identify potential tenants ahead of time so that when you start leasing up, we can have this seamless process of placing people in your unit. I want to tell you that one of the interesting things that we have here at DCA, you'll see back there, we have Patrick Brown, who's been our coordinator for 811. Sean Williams is the head of rental assistance and homeless programs here at DCA. You have Marie Polina, who does our portfolio management for our multifamily side. You have Ronit Hofer, who's one of our tax credit underwriters, and you have myself in this room. Because the idea is that we want it to work for the tenants, but we also want it to work for you. And ultimately, if we're going to expand this program, we need to make sure that you understand what your responsibilities are, that we answer your questions, and when you have a problem, we are out there to help you. So as we go along, if we don't hear the answers to your questions today, we have people writing down all the questions. We'll get you an answer. Y'all may be going to ask questions today that we haven't even thought about. And again, I think the only way we can be successful in this program, and we're going to need to be successful, there's a lot of oversight of what Georgia's doing under the Instead Settlement Agreement. It's going to be really important for you to have great communication with us. If you do get a tenant in your property and you have a question, you have a problem, you're trying to figure out how to handle something, you're going to have a whole list of people that you can call. You can call Patrick, you can call Marie, you can call Ronit, you can call me. Most of you already have my cell phone number. And we will do everything possible to help you before problems become too big for you to handle. How many people here in the property managers know that there's people with disabilities that already live in their property? Alcoholics, drug addicts, domestic violence victims. None of what we're talking about should be new for you as property managers. And I would say the most positive thing you should take away when you leave this meeting is that unlike a tenant that just comes to you, fills out a lease, and you place, you have a strong system of support for every tenant that is going to be placed in your property. And that at the end of the day, unlike somebody that you just take in, you're going to have a phone number to call. You're going to have a system in place when there's problems. You're going to know that as you go along and become familiar with this program and working with these tenant bases, DCA is going to be walking with you, both on the development side, on the property ownership side, on the tenant side, and we're probably going to flood you over the next couple of weeks with information, documents, procedures, so that you have at your hands an answer to every question that you have. So I'm going to sit down and let Marie start, but does anybody have any overall questions as to why we're here, or nothing at all? All right. Well, just like every other workshop that we do, break in any time. Just because we put something on the board doesn't mean you can't question us. If you're thinking about it, we get 2 slides ahead, raise your hand anyway. Because really our goal as we walk out of here today is to know what you're thinking and to get answers to all your questions.
Well, good question. Have you already run this through any property management firms to get feedback, or is this like first out of the hopper?
We had talked, Tom Curry gathered questions for us, and we met with him, and he kind of had been working with a lot of the property managers, and so a lot of what we put in here was gathered because he was working with property managers and talked about questions, David Bacon questions, process questions, tax credit questions. So hopefully most of those questions, but as far as the actual PowerPoint, no, you're our first group.
Okay. Second question. Can we adjust the air conditioning?
Yes.
I see a lot of fanners, and I know I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I guarantee you on the air. So I'm Marie Molina, and I know most of you, if not all of you, from being on the development side. Laurel probably did a great overview of most of the things that I'm going to talk about this morning. I will mention that if she didn't, that we're doing this as a webinar as well. We sent out an invitation late last night to catch anyone who was unable to be here, so that during this morning session, they can click on a link, they'll be able to hear what's going on, they'll be able to see the slides, and they'll be able to type in questions. And Kimberly, who I want to thank for setting this all up, is receiving the questions, and he'll let us know as we're going through this. So we're finally here with the A11. Many of you or your property owners have already received the agreement for rental assistance contract. That's the ARAC. We've got a whole new set of acronyms here. Ronit has been sending these out. She's been sending with them the RAC, which is the rental assistance contract, and she's been sending a checklist to try and help you figure out the parts that you have to fill out and the parts that we fill out. So the RAC that you have been customized as much as possible to the properties that we're interested in placing 811 tenants in. So as Laurel said, nearly all the properties in the past 5 rounds from 2011 to 2015 checked that block to say that they would accept either 811 rental subsidy or any other rental subsidy that the state may have available for folks who qualify under that Department of Justice settlement that relates to Olmstead. Over the years, that amount of assistance has been anywhere from 5% to 15% in that block that you check. Generally, the QAPs have required that you have about have 50% one-bedroom units in order to qualify to take those points. We're finding that we probably will have a need for some 2-bedroom units, and as the program has progressed, we have the ability now to subsidize 60% units as well. Okay, so initially we're targeting family properties. As Laurel said, again, we have the 2 grants. The total of those 2 grants is about $14 million, and we feel like for 5 years that each of those fundings cover, we should be able to support about 500 units. These folks are at 30% AMI or less. They are defined as severe and persistent mental illness or physically impaired, which is generally the money follows the person program. The program referrals come to DCA from our partner agencies, which is Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities and Department of Community Health, though through several layers of agencies that they fund and operate. These folks are being screened so that they are ready and able to live in an independent community. So they're not just taking the first person they see on the street and saying, here, have a unit. They're making sure that these folks are ready. And in some cases, these folks have already been living independently in a community. They've been on a different type of subsidy, and so they may switch into a different project. We're going to talk a little bit more about the tenant. the case managers are going to evaluate these tenants to make sure that they're able to live independently with the least amount of intervention. Before they put them into a unit, they're going to have an agreed upon plan to help that person to adjust. So that may include how often they see them. It may include...
Is the plan voluntary or is the plan required?
The services are all voluntary. We cannot force, nor can a landlord force a tenant to take services if they don't want them. In the process of getting a unit, they have to be referred by a case manager. So if they're not getting services and they're not working with a case manager, they can't be referred. You're right. I mean, I know the question that's out there is, can they just quit taking the services and then they get the unit? And you're right, they can.
The reason I ask is we work with the VASH program, and VASH, the veterans have the ability to either accept or not accept the services, but as a result, sometimes they get discharged, and when they're discharged, they're no longer in the program and they're gone. If in this kind of a situation, even though the individual's not accepting the services, are they still in the program? Can they be dropped from the program because they're not meeting the plan? That's what I'm wanting to understand, is because we have a lot of turnover in the VASH program because folks drop off because the VA stops providing services.
That's one of these advantages, because even if the person decides they don't want the services, and maybe they're getting along just fine without them for several weeks, and then hopefully you're going to have built a rapport with some service providers, whether they're seeing that particular tenant or not. And, you know, maybe you notice that you haven't seen this person. Maybe they take a walk every day, and for 2 weeks you haven't seen them, and you mention that to the case manager. The case manager is going to follow up with that person, whether or not that person is actively taking advantage of the services. So that, and that's a huge advantage, because you probably have tenants living with the same sort of issues that don't have somebody who's going to be around or anybody for you to call to keep in contact with them. So as I said, some of these folks are already housed in community settings under the Georgia Voucher Program or even Shelter Plus Care.
I have a quick question before you go on. We find many times when we have somebody in a mental crisis problem and we do call the local service provider, they close the window on us because of privacy. We don't have the right to that information, and they won't even confirm that that person is a client of theirs, although we know that they are. They won't talk to us. They won't even discuss the cases. Is something going to be in place so that we can get information?
But if you have an
privacy law shut us out.
If you have an emergency situation that you consider to be dangerous, then you handle it just like you would any other person.
Sometimes we try to prevent that danger and we see it coming, but yet these providers shut us out. They won't even confirm that it's a client because of HIPAA laws.
Right. Well, you're going to have phone numbers to call of people that are not dealing with the privacy information. And Marie's going to talk a little bit later. There's going to be these regional committees where hopefully if you have a problem with the tenant, you can notify us before you get to the point that you're talking about. You know, and I'm going to give you some examples of what we've heard from like some PHAs who have dealt with this tenant base for a long time. Somebody is knocking on doors, or somebody is loitering in the parking lot, housekeeping issues, things that are not necessarily a danger, but things that can easily escalate to a situation where you as a property manager think you need to start some kind of eviction proceedings. So there is going to be a process. There's going to be a committee where you can submit that this is an ongoing problem. The committee will work to draw out a plan for that tenant to abide by, and ultimately we'll have a timetable. You can participate in these regional committee meetings if you want, and ultimately if in fact it can't be resolved, then you are not stopped from evicting a tenant that isn't allowing other tenants to peaceably enjoy whatever that legal term is, the property. So what we're trying to do is to give you an alternative outside of simply calling a mental health provider. There's going to be other people that you can call, not about why is this person acting this way,
but this is the problem that is causing us angst. How do we solve that problem? And there's no privacy laws about that.
No, but what we see is that our good residents who get off their medication, we see it coming and we see the problems in the household, and they need the medical attention that needs to be given. That's where the veil comes down.
Early intervention is going to be critical. And Gabby, you've been in this business a long time. You know, maybe we need to have, Patrick, do we have some kind of a form that starts this process? Or is it just a phone call that starts this process?
Well, I think it's the phone call. And you're right about the regional committees or the umbrella. It gives the owners another avenue to go to. We want them to first contact the local agency that referred the tenant originally. But if that's not working, then they go through our committee system.
And Gabby, we'll take that issue back again, because maybe there can be a joint notification, so that when you make that phone call, you're letting us know, so that we can also be helping you to follow up, especially as we work through the beginning, making this program successful. Making sure that we're following up with those kind of issues as well. So maybe there can be a joint notification. So we just are aware that there's a problem, and we can do any follow-up that needs to be done.
Can I ask, what kind of information did you want to have? Like, you want to know what they're doing?
And no, we don't care about what they're doing. The issue is you've got a good tenant who needs their medication every day.
Right.
Without the medication, they're doomed for homelessness, or they're doomed to burn your building down, or they're doomed to hurt somebody. So when you can get in touch with the person responsible for their health, and they can come get them back on their medication, whether voluntary or involuntarily, then they can continue to live in a happy environment.
But you were saying
and what happens is when we call to say one of your clients, we believe, needs medical care now, they won't even discuss it with you. You're not party. You don't have permission to discuss their medical issue. And a lot of times, they just won't even confirm that that's even a client. So your wall, at least in a lot of rural areas, you don't have the right to that information. So a lot of times we call family. Sometimes family steps in.
So the issue is that once you notify the service provider, they won't even confirm or deny that
You don't get past the
reception.
receptionist. You don't get past the receptionist in a lot of cases.
So what you're looking for is to be at least know that a service provider is doing some kind of taking that.
Or just simply a permission slip, maybe, y'all.
Well, there is, and Patrick, maybe this is something you can answer too. You are allowed to have a permission slip for them to sign when they enter into their lease. Is that right?
That's correct. I think the difference with 811 is that our other state partners are invested in the program, and that they need the properties to make the program work. So they have a long-term commitment to every property owner to maintain a good relationship. So when they refer a tenant into your property, they have a vested interest that it will work, because we have a 30-year use restriction on the property. We're a partner with you over the long haul. DCA, behavioral health, and community health are all partners with us in a long-term commitment with each property, with each owner. So we're going to respond to your inquiry in a different way than what a referral from VASH or one of the other portable voucher programs. This is different because it's project-based. We have a long-term commitment, and it has to work over the long haul.
We will go over as we go on house rules, what you can put as a condition of your lease. There is a form that allows the tenant to designate a property, a family member or somebody that you can call if there's a problem besides that. So we're trying to give you some different alternatives.
Okay, so as Laurel said, there are house rules. If any of you look through the packets that were sent to your property, you'll see HUD's lease in there, and it's one that pretty much every state has complained about. We complained about it. HUD is just holding fast to that lease. What they have allowed us to do is, because we've brought up to them several items that are just typically in every lease, not just Georgia leases, but leases across the board that are not addressed in HUD's lease. So what they said is you can put them in the house rules. So when you get your lease, what you're going to need to do when you get your rack, you're going to need to send us a copy of the house rules. Ronit will go over this in more detail, but basically the things to know are the things that are in your lease that you want to make sure the tenant knows about, you know, security, parking, bricks or trash, that kind of thing, behavior, conduct. You can put them in the house rules. You know, for obvious reasons, you can't do anything that wouldn't be in the 4350 in HUD's handbook, okay? And where there was ever a conflict, and inadvertently a conflict with HUD's lease is going to rule, okay? But it does give you an opportunity to kind of fill in all those blanks that HUD's lease doesn't cover. So.
Just to reiterate that, I think it's important that people do that, because
Absolutely.
what I did is took our lease and our community policies and procedures, went through the HUD lease, took out the things in my lease that are referred to in the HUD lease, such as lease terms and things like that, and then took our lease, especially the important paragraphs that refer to things on the site that are more site-specific, or owner responsibilities, tenant responsibilities, stuff like that, added our policies and procedures and made that the house rule. So it allows you to operate the way you normally would. Then you end up basically with just a HUD lease for its lease term. So,
yeah.
About the time frame that this information was sent out to the property, I was really we have had my hands on it. You said it was sent out a while ago? Or which, when you say you're discussing the HUD lease that we should have had a chance to look at?
Well, that would have been with all the rack packages. So the rack package had the A-rack, the rack, and all of the exhibits that go with it. So it was
The owner or the?
And Lynette, let me tell you what was, look, I'm listening to what you're saying, and here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put on our website the owner's manual, the lease. If any of you are willing to send me sample house rules, we'll post those as sample house rules from other property managers, so you can share that kind of information. And we'll put a link for it on our newsletter that we send out, so you can click. You don't have to try to find it on our website. And that way, all of the documents regarding 811 will be in one place, so you can access them electronically and share them with anybody you think needs to be done. And we'll try to get that done by the beginning of next week.
but they have been forwarded to the home.
Yeah.
They haven't, and they're property specific. So they're, you know, and I'll go over, there were different sections that, you know, that we fill out, that we try to fill out as much as possible, and then the parts that you have to
These are
fill
just
out.
part of the procedures, because honestly, the owners get them, they're looking for them for one purpose. Property owners need to get them as well. So we'll make that available. We'll be sending out a link to all of our property managers through our compliance department, so that the property managers, I mean, this was, I think, one of the things that we started realizing. We're talking in our application workshop, we're talking a lot to the owners and developers. This is coming down the road, but we weren't including property managers. So this is the start of that inclusion process.
Laura, were those only sent to owners of tax credit properties?
Only tax credit properties.
Right, tax credit properties and ones that we felt had eligible units. So if you have 100% PBRA, you would not have gotten one. You know, if you have more than 25% of your population at the project is targeted to folks with disabilities, you wouldn't have gotten one because there's a prohibition of that. Elderly, right. If you had a property and your tenancy was elderly, because the limit on this is 61, you wouldn't have gotten one.
Those are also properties that wouldn't have been able to check the box.
They were able to check the box because it's not just 811. It's if we were to have the advantage of any other sort of rental assistance in the future, we would still be able to access those properties.
What you're going to find is we're targeting certain units to get the program rolling, and the idea is that it will be expanding to everybody that check the box through some form of rental assistance
program require use of EIV for participants?
Yes, it does, and we're going to cover that and the training for it in just a few minutes. Kimberly's reading the questions that people write in.
How many people are on the waiting list this house? I mean, is there a great demand?
Well, we've been, it's been a little bit of a chicken and the egg. We're building the waiting list. We're getting more and more folks on there and more interest. They're probably going to be closer to the cities to start with, just as the program grows and as the support service people and the properties begin to kind of network within each other. I think that it will go beyond that.
And I mean, I think, Nan, that you probably hit on what is the biggest problem and challenge that we're facing. And somebody asked me what kind of person needs to kind of be in charge of this. I said we need to hire somebody from Match.com. Because that's how I feel sometimes. You have to have the right tenant with the right number of people. You got to have a unit that opens up that's the right kind of unit. There's all of these different requirements to put people and units together. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy. So you're going to see as Marie goes through the process, what we're trying to do is if we don't have tenants ready to come into your unit, you're not going to have to let them sit empty. So you'll see how that process really, I'm not going to say understand, but takes into account the fact that renting your units is important. Your tax credit program rules you've got to meet. There's, operational feasibility. There's all kinds of different issues. So we're not going to hold the unit out for a year while we try to find somebody. And you'll see that it's going to be a very quick process. If we're not ready, we're not going to penalize you. So there'll be a process, and then the unit will be released. So.
Okay, so the referral system starts with DDHDD and MFP. So those are the two partner agencies. We have a written interagency partnership with them. So they're obligated to do this. This isn't just a, hey, can you send us some referrals? We have a system. We meet with them. We've been meeting with them monthly. We're moving to quarterly to make sure that we have a process in place. So their regional staff are meeting with clients all the time. They're gauging and evaluating their ability to live with relative independence. And they're also reviewing the housing options that are available. There are Georgia vouchers, there's Shelter Plus Care, there's the 811 program. So there may be one program that better suits their needs at this point in time. And that's why you may see some people who were on a different rental subsidy move on to the 811 because this might be optimum for their situation right now. What we're going to do when we get the referral is we're going to confirm the very basics to be able to qualify for a federal subsidy is that you haven't been convicted of producing methamphetamine in a federally subsidized unit, as you all know, and that you're not on a lifetime list of sexual offenders. So we're going to confirm that. We're also going to get a credit report. We're not going to do this to try and sort through their entire credit. What we're doing is getting that to sort of give the client and their case manager a heads up of what they may face when they're going to properties. As we get the racks in from your properties, we're going to list your tenant selection plans on our website. As Laurel mentioned, we have an 811 website. It should be live this week. We'll have those tenant selection plans up there so that the case manager and the client can go look at them. And if they can find one that might be more suitable to their history and their circumstances, then that's the best place for them to try and find a unit.
And if you look at what these things are telling you, is that we want the tenants we place in your property to be successful at living at your property. It's not going to work for us and it's not going to work for you if we move somebody in and within 3 or 4 months it's clearly not a successful arrangement and they move out. We are looking for stable housing for the people that are placed in this program. And what we're trying to do, and the Department of Behavioral Health assesses each tenant as it goes through their process, coupled with some things that we decided to do internally. We're hoping that our list, our waiting list of tenants, is a list that we're reasonably certain are qualified and able to live independently in these units.
Are we allowed to collect application fees like we do for the other units?
DDHDD and MFP are in a position to assist the applicants with their application fees. The 811 program doesn't have funding to pay application.
So you're saying that yes, they can charge their typical application fee?
Yes, they can charge a fee, and the providers will typically be paying that.
And if it's too much, we may come back to you, but typically, the fee should be able to cover your cost of the criminal background check, your cost of doing the credit check, so you can charge that typical fee.
Just to clarify, as a property management company, we have a set of selection criteria. These residents are still screened by us, and they still have to meet that criteria.
That's correct.
In addition to your screening.
Right. Now we're gonna talk to you in a little bit about what we call reasonable accommodation under fair housing, which is something that doesn't just apply to 811. It always applies for persons with disabilities, which is you may get a tenant that has a history of misdemeanors as a result of being homeless. I mean, that's probably the number one. You may find shoplifting, some things that you may absolutely ban. We may ask you to make a reasonable accommodation that some of those convictions, clearly they're not going to put your property in danger or the people in your property in danger, but as a result of them receiving service and being stably housed, some of those things are the result of the fact that they're disabled. And under fair housing, regardless of whether it's 811, there may be a reasonable accommodation. By doing the background checks ahead of time, we should know that when we send somebody over to you, so you may find we're prepared to have that conversation as soon as we start bringing that tenant over.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ronit Hoffer. She's going to talk to you about that system, includes the EIV and getting your training.
It's getting a little bit cooler in here, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I was going to talk about actually just the packages that y'all received, or some of you received, that we sent that contain all the pieces that go into getting it signed up and getting under the contract. I don't want to get to you need to get to this folder. Yeah. Well, we can, okay, we can open up any wrap. Let's see. So the first thing that that we asked everyone to complete was the ARAC, and most everybody did that. And that was just, and this is just showing what it looks like, and that we would be filling in most of it for you. The name of the project, the name of the owner, et cetera, and we just asked you all to sign that and get it back to us.
Why don't you give a brief definition of the difference between an ARAC and a RAC?
So the ARAC is the agreement to enter into a rental assistance contract. And essentially this is a memorializing that you all took points and that you are agreeing to complete the RAC when units become available, and that we can put those units under contract for 811.
We like to call it as kind of setting the mood that we're coming. So it's again a reminder, especially if you're getting close to lease up. We're going to be sending these out, and it's going to say, hey, there's a process that's going to need to happen for some of these units because you're a part of the 811 program. So it's not actually the agreement that you'll sign out. That'll get signed a little bit closer to when the units start becoming available. But this is really something that the property owners should take as just a notice that we're moving towards the RAC agreement and starting to place tenants in available units.
And this also helps us get the ball rolling with the HUD system, so it gets us a number, and it, it sort of creates that process and gets it going. So most everyone has done it, and yeah.
I'm curious, as you were looking at the properties, you're trying to decide what kind of subsidy goes to them. Are you thinking that only one form of subsidy goes to a particular property? And I ask that because from a property management side, if you have 5 units that are set aside in a certain way that's easier than 3 units this way, 2 units that way, are you looking at the 811 is going to be what, you know, ABC property gets, as opposed to ABC property gets 811 and 2 other forms of subsidy?
No, right now it's just about 811. When we talk about assessing the needs of the tenant, you may find that depending on where the tenant lives or where they want to live, that a Georgia voucher is a better choice. So that's a decision that would be made outside of the 811 program. Some tenants may be referred to properties that have shelter plus care, depending on the disability and the availability. So the Department of Behavioral Health is assessing the tenant, making sure they can live independently, and helping us get our list together for 811. So we're not going to come to you and say, okay, sign an agreement, we're going to give you 2 811s, 2 shelter plus cares, 1 Georgia, and 1 of this. You're going to get an agreement just for 811.
You know how complex it is, and so I'm just trying to figure out what's the plan ahead.
Just 811. Now, if somebody comes to you with the Georgia voucher, a Section 8 voucher, that,
we know our responsibilities.
Right.
The rack one. Okay, so this is the rack. This is the big piece here. And if we scroll down here, I highlighted. Hopefully, it's still showing up. So if it's not highlighted, that should be okay. Stop. All right. So the areas that are highlighted are the areas where you all are going to be filling in the information. So the project address and what services and equipment are there at that property. You scroll down further here. What utilities and any other items that we fill in. You don't have anything other than the blank. And then what I'm showing here in the contents of the contract, what the exhibits there are, what happened when I sent the package is that I sent all of the exhibits. So I sent exhibit 1 through 7. Now some of those exhibits, I'm just provided them to you so that you all have them and you know what the exhibits are, but you don't have to do anything with them. There really are exhibits, and for example, the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan, that's from us. We are the grantee, DCA is the grantee. But I provided it with you just so that you know what it is and so that you have a copy of it. You can just keep it. You don't have to send it back. That's why that's not included there. But Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 4 are the pieces for you all to complete. So if you scroll down a little bit farther, Exhibit 1 is part of this here, and there's the signature page. Okay, so stop here. So Exhibit 1, when I sent these to everybody, they were tailored to the project. So it says the number of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, depending on how many units we are going to assign. It's going to be somewhere in 11 units or less. And if you had 11 1-bedrooms, we would do 11 1-bedrooms. But if it you didn't have enough 1-bedrooms for the amount that you were contractually obligated to do, then we would assign it to 2 bedrooms as well. And that's the same thing with 50% versus 60%. We're trying to start with 50%. If you were had to do 8 units and you only had 5 50% units, then we would take the 60% as well. So I tried as best I could from the information that we had to fill in the number of those units and the breakdown between that unit. But what we needed you all to fill out is what your contract rent is and what your utility allowance is for each of those units. And then when we get it back, we will be able to do the calculation, we'll figure out the gross rent, and then we'll do the calculation of what the subsidy is. So then we'll fill in this last column. Pat will do that calculation, and that will show the amount of the subsidy. If you scroll down a little bit here. So then you're just also will let us know the number of non-assisted units that you have with disability.
Utility allowances, I'm not familiar with 811, so this may be a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. HUD on the project-based rental assistance side has very specific guidelines they've just published in the last year about how to do utility allowances. Is 811 in that, or does 811 use a utility allowance from a PHA?
They don't use the HUD calculator.
No, because these are tax credit units that you have to use it from the PHA or the PJ that.
So curious there, home units, you would be using two different kinds of utility allowance?
Consumption allowances, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. HUD requires a consumption form.
No, so
Okay.
in these projects, you cannot use the consumption.
So you have to use the PHA utility allowance.
Which reduces your rent unbelievably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I were in Atlanta, I'd have to use the Atlanta Housing Authority utility allowance. If I were in Troup County, I would use DCA's utility allowance, correct?
This is something my suggestion would be get HUD to actually tell you this in writing, because they have a lot different internal opinions about it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think especially when you get into layering those different funding sources that use different utility allowances, it becomes complex. So we probably need to have some written guidance out there too that says if it's tax credit and home, you know, NA11, if it's just tax credit, what else does it?
Just, I just know the multifamily office is
Yeah.
unusual about these kind of things.
Right.
We
I
have
mean,
a
there's
section of
multiple
project-based.
utility allowances now, and then how about with USDA? We have to look at that too and see how these work with USDA units. How do you do Section 8 right now, Abby, if you're in a USDA property?
We're talking about walkaway vouchers?
Yeah, you're just talking about walking vouchers.
We still use our same utility allowance. Now the difference, the walkaways use theirs, but they kind of come back to a formula that says just the amount that you're charging for basic rent, which is what we end up getting for the voucher. Does it fit within what they're willing to pay? And so we don't get into the minutia of their utility allowance versus ours. On our TICs, we use our utility allowances. And very rarely does the Section 8 walkaway voucher not pay us the basic rent. It's a couple of small pockets in South Carolina are real.
You're talking about a tenant.
That's for the tenant voucher.
Okay, well, these are projects.
But you know,
She asked me about how the tenant voucher
how she
works.
handles it.
And then on our project-based rental assistance, where we have this Section 8 project-based with USDA, we use the PHA.
I think in terms of for property management
But we don't have tax
purposes,
credits on those, so that using that higher utility allowance doesn't freak us out. You know, we're worried about what is the, you know, what gross rent is, and therefore what is our rent that we're charging? Can we survive on that lower amount? If your public utility allowance, which is probably 4 times higher than our real utility allowance is used, is that going to reduce on these units our contract rent? It could take it down. I mean, I don't know. Could it take it down really low now? Because, I mean, here's these guys have built these amazing energy efficient apartments, and our utility allowance on seniors might be $45, $50 for utilities, and we use a public utility allowance. Does our rent go lower?
that's definitely a question we'll go back to HUD on and just make sure we're clear, because there clearly has been a movement even since 811 came down to allow that consumption-based type of utility allowance.
We pushed energy efficiency, and they performed. And here we are using the utility allowance and reducing the amount of the rent
Yeah, it
that
doesn't
we
make
can
any
charge.
sense because the PHA utility allowance probably is not going to be any reflection of the actual
No
utility
reflection.
cost. of
And
the
it's
property.
probably based on summaries of projects that have not been, you know, old projects. Where are they getting these numbers from? I don't know.
But you are using them on the project-based
Yeah, but I don't have tax credits, so our rents, the rents that we collect on project-based USDA projects is really high. You know, we're in the $700-800 levels in a lot of USDA projects with project-based Section A. They don't in no way reflect the rents that we get in them.
The other thing, Laurel, is that the first aspect, when you finish construction, HUD has you do an energy calculation that then determines what the utility allowance should be. Then you switch to consumption-based in future years. So that's why I'm just bringing it up, because when you get to lease up, you need it to happen quick, and this kind of stuff can really tie up time.
We've talked about that internally, and really understanding the utility allowances is going to be really critical for you all to be able to implement the program. I agree totally.
You know, AHA's allowance for multifamily is $19.96 and newer, so all that housing is good together. And it really hurts the newer energy efficient properties, even within an agency like Atlanta.
You know, HUD doesn't always act logically. I know. So, you know, and what they do with PHAs is sometimes different than what they're doing with home, and there seems to be a lot of dissension right now within HUD. But I think that's a great question, and we'll go back and make sure that we give you guys a clarification on that.
Halifax property uses usually allowances from DC's southern region. Then do we use the local PHA's utility allowances for program participants?
Can they use DCAs?
Yes, if we're the PJ for them, they would use it just like any other.
So one other thing that I have seen happen is people sign this box, but this box is just for later use. If we, coming down the road, that there is flexibility in changing these units around. So if we signed up, you know, all 1 bedrooms, and it turns out it looks like we need some 2 bedrooms in that property because there's some demand for that, then we would be able to make amendments and make changes to this part of the RAP, and that is what this box is for. So initially, you don't need to sign that box.
If a property owner hadn't received this packet, and because of what you guys have did your assessment on it, we propose some units in the near future, are we able to get into this?
Are you saying that we didn't send it to you, but you want to volunteer?
Yeah, I'm saying I didn't get it.
We'd love you if you'll volunteer. I mean, I think the biggest problem you'll have, just because I know the nature of your business, is who are you already housing in there? Because if you're already housing a certain number of people with disabilities, it may not be eligible. But we're really looking, I mean, it's a great segue into the fact that, you know, we really feel the easiest way to do it is at LISA. But we have a big hurdle to overcome that could really impact all of our HUD funding if we can't place people in these units really, really quickly. So if you're a property owner and you have an older property, you know, something that you might be willing to step up and say, we'll take some, you know, tenants, you need to call us. And not saying you'll get a point or anything, but, you know, really it's rental assistance in an older property. You know, I mean, we're going to do an inspection. It could be a real benefit to some of the properties, depending on whether we have people that can be placed. So we may call on you. We're trying to do it so that, you know, we kind of are starting rolling it out limited until we kind of get there. But if you've got some properties, you've got a bond properties would be great. You know, you got a big bond property and you want to, you know, have 5 units or 10 units of rental assistance. This is a great program for that, especially, you know, in the city of Atlanta, Macon, you know, in the metropolitan areas where there is significant populations that need to be housed.
So that's a yes. Look.
Yes, we will take, I mean, if the property qualifies and it fits the criteria, great. So this is okay, yeah, so this is Exhibit 2, that's part of RAP 1. That's all you guys fill that all that information, because this is the IRM form that goes in for HUD. So again, so here it says Exhibit 3, the grantee is affirmative fair housing marketing plan. That's ours. I sent it to all of you in that package, but that's just something for you to have on your file so that you know that this is what goes into the rack, but you don't have to do anything with it. Down. Exhibit 4 is the use agreement, and then I can pull that up here. The use agreement, and we can send you out, it was the one that HUD created was not in recordable form for Georgia, and we've done it so that it is in a recordable form, so we can get that out to all of y'all. And most of it, we will fill in most of the information in for you. Scroll down, I think it's highlighted in green where it's us, and I think everything else, keep going. It's just dates and the name, and there's yellow, down, yellow, there, you sign it. That's essentially what you have to do. So, and you'll send that back to us, and we will get it recorded. So this is the 30-year use agreement that gets recorded, and that's part of WRAC. So then the Exhibit 5 to the RAC Part 1 is the model lease. Again, that's something, it's a form I sent to you. That's something that you don't need to send back to us at this point, because obviously that's when you actually have the tenant and complete the lease. But part of the attachment to the lease, so we have the attachment to the exhibit, which is where you get your house rules. So that is where you fill in that part, and you do need to send those house rules back to us so that we can just review them and make sure that it doesn't have any major conflict with the model lease. And there is part of that package. There was a house rules guidance that sort of did what you had explained, what things need to go in there and what things can go in there, and how you address that. So that is an attachment to the exhibit or to the lease. Then there's other, the other attachments is you have pet policy and live-in aid policy. And then the last two exhibits to the RAC, Part 1, is are the definitions and the program guidelines. Again, these are things you don't have to do anything with. It's just that you have them with you so that you know what's part of your contract. You don't need to send it back, but those are our forms that we need to pass. And then the last part is, can you close this one out, is the RAC Part 2, which really all that needs to happen for that is, RAC 2. So we'll fill in the top there, scroll down. So this just gives all the sort of details of the program. So, and then down. 2 point. So this is 2.7. So there's nothing that you guys need to fill in for this, but this is where you get sort of the meat of the rules for what the requirements are. And this is talks about the initial rents, and we have the policy of for rent and for how we do rent adjustments. And that's something that were exhibits to this part of the RAC that I also sent to you. Again, something to have so that you know what's contained in the RAC, but you don't need to send it back. And so the last thing I just want to pull up, you can close this up. Anyway, the RAC document checklist looks like this, and that essentially goes through everything we just went through. And it shows each piece, each exhibit to the attachment attachments to the exhibits or all these whatever, and it has, if it's a check mark on the owner side, that's something that you fill out. If it's a check mark on the DCA side, that means that's us, and that you don't have to do anything with it. So hopefully that, and it goes section by section, so it'll remind you very clear of which pieces that you need to fill out and which parts are for us, and that you don't need to really worry about. Yes.
These forms or these examples of forms available on the 811 website?
Yeah, we'll do all that. Hopefully, the owners should have all these packages, and we'll have them custom to each property, so that the parts that we could fill out, I've already filled out. The key, the biggest, the most important part is really figuring out that unit mix in terms of the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 50%, 50%. And when we initially sent them out, I was just asked everyone, get those 8 racks back. That was, again, the agreement to enter into the rack. And I asked everyone to do those lickety-split, get those back. But now we're moving on, and we're really in a push to let's get these racks signed. And so that they are ready, we can start sending them to HUD. We don't know exactly how long it will take for HUD to process them and get them finalized. So our approach now is to just get these racks signed and send them through, so that as soon as those units are available for you, we can start making referrals, and we just want to get that ball rolling. So I know some people sort of felt like, oh, we're going to hold off on signing the rack until they came here today. So today is ready to go. You're here. Go back to your office and sign those racks and get those back in, so that we can get that ready for when the units are available.
Any questions on the document? Okay. So Ronit talked about this. These are the steps that you'll go through once that rack is signed. Right, the rack, yay rack, and the rack will get signed. Already in all the 6 regions that DBHCD sets out, there are support service teams that are working daily with clients and qualifying them and determining what the best housing procedure is for them. Ones that are qualified and where 811 seems like the best route for them to take are being referred and put on our wait list. Once we get the rack in, we get it executed here. As Ronit said, we send it off to HUD for them to process. Once we do that, we're going to schedule an appointment with Navigate. Navigate is at Navigate Affordable Housing, Inc., and they are the vendor that will provide the training. So they'll help with the EIV training. They'll help you with the ELOC and the TRACS, which are the systems that you use to be able to submit so that you can start getting your subsidy flowing. So you're going to have that training. I think they offer it online, but they'll also come on site, so that you'll have that training while we're waiting for HUD to process this and we're waiting to get a suitable referral to your property. Okay. Meanwhile, you will have sent us your tenant selection plans. They'll be up on our website. As Ronit said, the rack, sort of a sample document, all the information we can provide will be up on the 811 website, which again should be live this week, so you'll be getting an email blast. When you have a vacancy, or when you're at least 90 days out from your start of lease up, you're going to send an email, and we have a form. Again, it's going to be on the website. You'll send that to 811 vacancy, pretty easy to remember, to let us know. So if you have a property and you're up and stabilized and somebody gives you a notice that they're going to vacate in 30 days, that's the time to send it to us, because immediately we can go ahead and start finding someone who's interested in living in your area, get that ball rolling, so hopefully there's just no delay by the time the unit is actually vacant and when the tenant is qualified to move in. Okay.
Are you focused on trying to do this during lease up, or is this really what you're focused on is more as units turn over in the future?
As we start the program, we're doing it as whichever way works. If we're out ahead of lease up quick enough, it won't impact anything. They'll be ready and waiting when the unit opens up. If the property's operating again and there's an upcoming vacancy, we want to try and get them in. We clearly understand that during lease up, it's crucial to get your units occupied. So we're not going to hold up a unit to wait for an 811, you know, if it's going to impact your ability to claim your credit. If we are notified of a vacant unit and we don't have anybody on the waiting list, even in that general vicinity, to start with, Pat may make a call to the folks in that region just in case somebody's in process and they're getting ready to push a button. If there's nothing out there, they're just going to call and say, we don't have anybody, go ahead and lease it. So you're not going to be holding the unit just in the hope that there's somebody who wants to move to the end. You know, if we don't have anybody there, then you're going to be able to release the unit and go ahead and rent it as you would normally. Okay, so if we do, and when we do send someone, the person is going to contact you, make an appointment to come see the property. Most likely we'll have a case manager with them. Just do what they normally do. They'll look at the property, they'll fill out the application, so forth and so on, and you'll let us know the disposition of that application. So if they just, you know, if everything's great, perfect, let us know. You know, tell us when they're moving in, and if there are issues and they don't seem like anything that could be overcome, then let us know that as well. And we'll keep track of that so that we have an idea of the issues that our tenants are bringing to the properties, so that we can figure out a way maybe to better serve them. Okay, so as I said, Pat's Office of Special Housing Initiatives is working constantly with DBHCD and MFP and their local service providers. We want to really make sure that not only do we have a relationship with them, but you guys have a relationship with them, because the better that relationship is, the more proactive we can all be in trying to make sure that this is successful.
I have a question. Sometimes when you're working with case managers and their client vacancy tends to be for an extended period of time because they need some, they have extra circumstances that they have to take care of, so your vacancy loss tends to be for a longer period of time. Is there something that the 811 program compensation for holding that unit for that period of time?
Yes. And what we're going to do, and I'll just, since you brought it up, I'll go over it now, is what we're going to do is we've built in a 10-day grace period. We are pretty confident that if you guys are notifying us as soon as possible, we're not even going to have to use that. But in the case where, let's say we have, you're in downtown Savannah and we have 10 folks that are interested in that unit, we're going to send 4 out to you just to get them starting the process going. As they go through the process and, you know, if they were to be eliminated, we'd be sending 4 more. It might take 10 days to do that. So we're going to ask for that. If we see that we've gone through 8 of them, we still have people, and another 2 people have come on our waiting list, and now we have another 4 people that are interested in that Savannah area, we have the ability to start paying a vacancy payment. So we can pay 80% of the rent for up to 60 days to hold a unit. Okay, it's the same thing as if you have a person getting 811 that's in one of your units and they leave, we have the ability to pay rent on that unit until we can refer another 811 person. Again, if we don't have anybody anywhere close that's interested in your area, we're not going to make you hold the unit. We don't want to pay rent on a unit that nobody's going to live in, and we don't want it to be vacant at your property. So we're gonna, we're asking you to keep in touch with us. And, when you send that vacancy form, if there's more information for us to have to better serve you and better serve the tenant, call and tell us, or write it on the form or something so that we know. Don't just send the form in and hope we figure it out. Okay? So as I said before, the track training, and this is tenant rental assistance contract. I'm really bad with the acronyms. Once I get the little word, I forget what it means. But it is the system. I believe it's an upload type system that you get a password, you upload into Navigate system. Really, your information is going to go to Navigate. Navigate's going to make sure it's accurate. They send it to us. We send it to POD. I send it back, and we deposit it into your account. Okay. All right. So you're going to get the training for that. So by the time you send us that first notice of vacancy, you should already know how to access the system, and then you can contact Navigate if now you've got the tenant and you're ready to plug your stuff in, and you're like, oh my God, I forgot everything. You can contact them, and they'll walk you through it. Our wait list is automated by a third party. It's the one that we use for our Section 8 program statewide. And again, a copy of your tenant selection plans is going to be on that 811 website. So our partners that are doing the support services are going to be accessing that website to make sure that they've got good information about your property. Okay, it's not efficient if they're sending their clients to places that there's no chance they can get in, or that are not in the area that they want to live in, and it's not efficient for you to spend time with them if there's just no chance that it's a good match, just like Laurel said. So we're trying to tighten that up. We are always open for suggestions. So if you see during this process that there's a simpler way for us to handle this that will accomplish the same thing, by all means, let us know. Okay? So,
Does your waiting list ask folks where they want to live?
it does. It's broken up into the 6 regions that Department of Behavioral Health sort of splits up the state. So it covers the entire state. Again, a lot of folks are going to want to live near cities simply because that's where services are, that's easier transportation. Our projects, we try to make sure that they're proximate to grocery stores and medical facilities and those kind of things. So they're going to be more attractive, but that's not to say that you don't have someone who's been on a Georgia voucher and can be moved to a project that's closer to their home and is completely, for the most part, independent with maybe taking a medication. Okay, so we're going to allow 10 days. And as you mentioned, sometimes these folks, it's going to take them a little while to get there. Most of them are not going to be driving their own car, so then they have to wait for the case manager to accompany them. So we just want to make sure that they can get there. We're putting some strict guidelines on them. We're telling them that in 2 days, you have to contact the property. If we make a referral and you say you're interested, you've got to contact the property and make an appointment so that we know that they are interested and that we're not holding your units if they're not going to do their part. They've got an additional 5 days to get in, so they're not going to make their appointment and go, well, I'll call you when I'm ready. No, they need to come in within 5 days. If they don't do their part, then you don't have to hold the unit if we don't have any other referrals for you.
Will we get some kind of verification in writing? I mean, I can kind of see managers getting loosey-goosey with this. I called somebody, we send the email, but we didn't, or we got a telephone call back. Will we get something back from y'all by email?
Confirm. When you send the vacancy notice in, you'll get a confirmation that we've received the vacancy and we've posted it.
And then we'll get confirmation that we can rent?
Then shortly after that, we'll either accept the unit or pass on it.
Okay.
If we accept it, then you'll start getting referrals.
Will the referrals be in writing?
Yes, they'll be on a form.
Paper or electronic?
We'll send it to you electronically.
Thank you.
I'm not sure you can see this, but I couldn't make it any bigger. But this tells you sort of how that process works. If you have PBRA, I imagine it's the exact same thing. So when your tenant moves in, you're going to get in the system, you're going to apply for the prorated rent for that month plus the following month's rent. So you're going to put that in the system. By the end of that first prorated month, hopefully you will receive the prorated rent plus the upcoming month's rent. So you're going to be a month ahead each time that you go into the track system, put your information in. And again, part of Navigate's job, part of what they've committed to us to do, is to work with you. So if you're sending stuff in and it's not going to be able to get processed, it's got something missing or it's not in correctly, they're going to get in touch with you before it goes any further. It's not going to go all the way to HUD and then find out that we can't pay it. It's going to come right back to you, and they're going to help you make sure you know how to do it so that we can correct that, and then moving forward, you know how to get it in so it goes through efficiently. Okay. Does anybody use a system like this now for CBRA? So it's not completely foreign to anybody? Okay. Okay. All right.
We go back to the rent in the PBRA. Are we, let's say they move in on the 5th or whatever, we send in the information to Navigate, which is basically our process for billing, right? Will we eventually be on the place where we're being paid by the first of the month for that month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's why you're going to do the prorated month. So if you leave
But
it
you're
on
moving
the
in today, so I'm billing you for the rest of this month as well as next month.
Exactly.
And then the following month, I'll be getting the rent on the first of the month.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Another question. Occasionally we raise rent. How does, sometimes we're not allowed to. How do we implement increases in rent through this program? Because usually it's done at the end of the lease. So if somebody's on a 12-month lease through this, and we raise our rent $15 6 months down the road, when it comes time to renew the lease, and everyone else is up $15 or getting there, how do we implement a rental increase in this program?
Okay. In this program, we use the same methodology that they use in Section 8, which is a budget expense-based increase. They have to be approved by HUD, rent increases. So I would recommend, we all know what that's like. I would recommend you just get, I'm sure you're planning for your increases as far in advance as you can, just for budgeting purposes. So as soon as you do that, go ahead and get in to us your request. And I think Pat will probably have some forms or, some instructions.
We'll be working with all the owners.
Okay.
90 days prior to the anniversary of your RAC,
Right.
Navigate will contact you to see if you're interested in doing a rent increase and helping you with the process to complete the request, justifying it with the information that they need, and then.
So they will. So the annual expiration of RAC is when.
Right.
Okay.
You're going to want to start way in advance.
Yeah.
It's an OCAP adjustment, which is an automated factor per year, 1%, 2%, 3%. You're also likely to be required to do a rent comparability study, so you're going to want to really start way ahead of 90 days, or you're going to be late. Just like,
Navigate will trigger that process. They'll remind the owners, and then that's part of our contract with them is to help the owners through that rent increase process.
Any other questions? So CBHPD and Michael as the person, folks, the local service providers are working with the tenants. It is at the tenant's option, but as we said before, if the tenant decides not to continue services, that doesn't mean that that case manager can't go back and talk with them and, try and counsel them if nothing else.
One thing that I've seen successful in this, because we do work with BASH and we work with Money Follows the Person, is that if we have a relationship with the provider and we know who to call, instead of 17 different case managers, if we know who to call? Is that the way you're thinking this is going to go? So that we're going to deal with this agency with these subset of people instead of 6 different agencies who deal with the 6 different clients I have?
Yeah.
What are you guys thinking?
Well, we can't restrict it to one service provider. You can't tell the person, who you've got to use as a service provider. But what we found is there tend to be 2, maybe 3 large community service boards in each of these regions that are servicing the tenant. So at most, maybe you would have 3 service providers. You're only going to have, you'll have 11 or fewer units. Most of them are going to be less than that because of the percentage of your property. So if you have a smaller property, obviously the smaller number of units. So chances are you may have just 1 or maybe 2 case managers from the same firm. But we absolutely want to do everything we can to facilitate a relationship between the property staff and the support providers, because that really is the key. I mean, we would love it if there's we're going to facilitate having monthly meetings in each of the regions so that the property staff or whoever you feel like is the best person to attend can just sit and just talk about, either issues that people are seeing and maybe we can brainstorm on that, or best practices, things that you're seeing that do work, any concerns that you have to keep the dialogue open. And if in those meetings something comes up that maybe everybody is seeing and it's an issue, they can raise it to the regional level and they can also raise it to the state level because we're meeting with the state quarterly as well. So if it seems like a programmatic type thing that maybe we can address at the state level, we can also do that.
When the client comes, do you think the client will actually have information about who their provider is when they come in the door the first time?
Yeah, I
Or is
would
it something
say
we have
they're
to
going
wait
to probably have their provider with them.
The only way they can get onto the 811 wait list is through the provider. So they have to come, they have to be referred from DVHCD or MSP. So they're coming, that's the only way they can get it. So they're going to have some providers with them.
I mean, you just, kind of like Bambi was pointing out, is that for us to be successful, the discussions back and forth need to be happening, and instead of waiting till it's a problem, because when you wait till it's a problem, it's actually too late.
A big problem.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
It reads to me, or it sounds like to me, that these referrals are coming from DVHCD, but the DVHCD has local providers kind of in their continuum. Right. So as a service provider as well, are we taking some of our people, say in our transitional housing or emergency housing, and somehow reporting out to DVHCD, and they're feeding these people over to this permanent setting with 811, or is DVHCD using ACT teams or PAP teams that's just out there trying to find that individual that are not in their continuum, referring to these 811 programs?
I would think it would be all the above. Because they're going to, some folks, I would imagine, that are in emergency shelter may not be ready to be living in a community. So there may be some steps. They may have some steps. You probably facilitate a lot of those steps to a certain point, and then when those folks are ready to be in a integrated, independent community, then hopefully they have a provider that's going to be able to give them those referrals.
I ask just for one point, if we're doing transitional housing and we have permanent housing, right? Then we have 811. Back in the day when we could refer into permanent housing when those individuals were still considered homeless, you say a little louder, we could just refer to our own other programs. But this way it seems like, we kind of have to go call out to DVHCD, who's funding the transitional, and say, in a sense, bring them through DVHCD to get right back to us, in a sense. Is that kind of?
Yeah.
That's true?
Yeah. Your clients are eligible.
Right.
They just need that conduit, that staff person at DVHCD or MFP to refer them to the 811 program.
So you're not a provider for DVHCD?
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
So he's a provider for DVHCD. Can he just do it? Right?
Yeah, if you're a DVHCD.
So you would just go to our website. There's got, the the forms and so forth are there, and you would just make the referral.
Just make it.
Yeah, so you don't have to go to somebody else. It's through the providers. It's not DVHCD like downtown that's doing it. It's the local folks, and you would be local to Atlanta. Okay, does that make sense? So it's the folks that you're seeing, you know, maybe in your properties already, or that you just, you know in your areas that are going to be making the referral. It's not going to come out of, you know, DVHCD.
Marie, did he just volunteer to be the guy we all blame? Wow.
Oh, he's RMJ. Okay, but to your point, we absolutely want you to get to know the support providers. I mean, that is the best way, and to know your tenants as well, because that's the only way that you're going to recognize if there is something different in their behavior, just like you would with any other tenant. I mean, I think that's, you know, that's probably what you do with everybody, especially if you have, you know, elderly projects. I know that you know, you guys are making sure that they're getting out, you're noticing if you're not seeing them, and that's the same that you do here. Okay, so this just talks about the monthly meetings. They're just to try and get out any issues, global issues that more than one project are seeing, any best practices. Some of that will be helping you build a rapport with other projects, because you may have tenants with similar situations, and you may have the same support providers that are working with both properties. We're going to do everything we can to facilitate the continuation of those meetings. It's really going to depend on you guys. We can't make you go to the meetings. We can't make you send somebody there. If you don't, it might be a little bit more difficult for you to have a successful program with it. It's clearly to your advantage to participate in anything that we can put together to help you to be more proactive, just like you would in your regular daily business. I mean, you know, your ability to communicate your concerns and be proactive in your role is just the same for the success of this program as it is for the success of your own properties based on your expertise and your professionalism. So each quarter, or as requested, there's a representative from the state committee. Could be Pat, could be somebody from DVHD that'll come down and attend your meeting just to make sure everything's going well, so that you've got somebody there. So if there was something you were kind of on the fence, do we really need to talk to anybody else about this? Maybe that'll come out. We're trying to be proactive as well. Whoever attends that meeting also attends the state level meeting. So again, if it's a programmatic issue, or maybe it's an efficiency that you've come up with in your smaller group, but it's something that impacts the program, so we have to kind of figure out how to implement it. That's what they're for, to bring those concerns back to us. You're always welcome to contact myself, or contact Pat, or Ronit, or Laurel, as she said, if there's something that you see that you think that we need to elevate quickly, or that you just want to talk through to see if it makes sense.
DVHD has the provider meetings quarterly or bi-monthly, something like that. Will this be a part of, could this be a part of kind of the conversation at the provider meeting? Do you know if there's
A group that's already meeting?
Yes,
Or just the providers?
Just for the providers only.
We certainly would like to tie into anything that's happening in the Atlanta area. I think in the other outlying areas, we're creating a new process. But in Atlanta, it would be good if you're meeting on a regular basis, we could just start it from the new room.
And if they're already doing those meetings, then it makes more sense to cut down on the meetings and be able to incorporate some of the property managers from these projects. And then we could certainly talk to them about that, and, you know, just ease up so it's not one more meeting. So the ideal situation is, yes.
Sorry, just a quick question. Reasonable accommodation requests, would they be treated any differently with this program?
Nope. This is the same as anything. Okay, and the same thing if you have a reasonable modification. So if you have somebody that comes to your property and they might need something shifted in the unit, treat it the same way. Oftentimes, the folks from DBHDD or MSP will have funds that can help you to make that modification to the unit to accommodate the residents.
Just in the same, I think that probably what you may see here is more reasonable accommodations for misdemeanors, things like that. I think that's not a change from fair housing, but I'm not sure there's been an emphasis on that up until the last couple of years. Maybe what we'll do is we'll post some of the recent articles that have come out, like from TRAC, with suggestions. I think in some of our QEPs, I'm pretty sure there's a provision right now that talks about that you have to have for every new project funded, a provision that talks about reasonable accommodations, with the idea that as we house more and more difficult to serve populations, you might get more requests. I think that's a whole conversation we'll have more. It's not a change, but I think there's more of a focus from HUD on exactly what that means.
Okay, anything else? Okay. So if you have a standard leasing office, if you have maybe a part-time leasing person that comes in, and maybe that case manager can share that desk just to have a base in your leasing office to stop in, it might just help to facilitate that conversation. So instead of them going directly to their client, and bypassing anybody that's any of the staff, maybe it just gives them the opportunity to come in and say, hey, and if you do notice something, you might be more apt to mention it to them then than if you're thinking you have to stop and make a phone call or chase them down in the parking lot. We really want you to build rapport. We think that that's, just starting that conversation is the best way to be proactive and to hopefully make this program successful. If you run into two issues, there can be a more formal meeting schedule that would have the support provider and the tenant sit down. The property manager may or may not want to be in attendance at that to make either a plan or to make sure that the tenant understands that whatever behavior they're displaying or whatever the issue is, whether it's a dirty apartment or whatever, is a significant issue and that they need to address that behavior. This doesn't mean that if they are threatening people with a knife, you should stop and have a meeting. Not at all. This does not take away your right to evict them if they do something that you would evict anybody else for. That's not what this is. This is just if you notice that this person is, they have Tourette's and they're hanging out in the leasing office, and so children are there at the daycare next door and it's a little troublesome. That's something that you might want to work with the case manager, sit down, explain to them, and have them hang out in a different area because of the children. Something reasonable. I mean, it doesn't take away your rights. It just helps us to help them to learn how to live in a community more effectively.
I'm thinking this through a little bit. We want to work with the clients. We have clients that have issues all the time. Bringing in a third party, though, you have to have the right to actually speak to the third party about the specifics. We mentioned the possibility of having some sort of permission slip in the beginning. Absent permission slip, we're really stuck in a position, though, where we could never speak to a third party and say that that Tourette's issue is happening. We can't just call up a provider and say, hi, we have a lease violation related to this person. We really would need the ability to share that.
I don't understand why you wouldn't. I think it would
just
be
like if we were working with you on a lease, you wouldn't want us sharing your information with some third party. We would not have that right.
I mean, we may not like it, but everything we do.
We can't share with you. The case manager may not be able to say, well, they had a loss in their family and so their issue is magnified while we're working through the loss, and they can't tell you stuff.
I think my immediate reaction would be is I'll be talking to my attorney to make sure I can do that. I don't believe I can.
We're not talking about medical information. No. We're talking about, I don't think that there's a privacy that this person is having a that there's a, the apartment has housekeeping issues. I don't think there's any health or privacy. Certainly the healthcare providers may have a problem with telling you, well, I know that's because you're changing his meds, or, we're aware of the problem, so you may not get a very good answer. But there should be nothing that prevents you from picking up the phone and calling one of the numbers we give you, which may be one of the caseworkers, and saying, we're having problems with this tenant. This is what we're seeing, so we want to make you aware of it. But go ahead. I mean, if you get a different answer, let me know. But I don't think that kind of information has any kind of privilege.
We've gotten some.
It's the same thing as on an elderly property where you have an application filled out and you have an emergency contact who happens to be a family member.
They give permission for that to happen, though. That's why we do that.
It's because it's on the thing. It's the same thing with case management. There's a permission for you to call them. They're enrolled in the program.
I just think we need to be really clear that that's something we need to sign on the way.
Well, we contact a family member, you still have to have their permission to contact them.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a workaround, because I know other programs where you're dealing with case managers.
Well, isn't it the same as batch? I mean, you don't have to have permission to talk to the VA folks.
Right.
I mean, I would think this would be the same, a similar situation.
We'll talk to them. I mean, I think some people may feel more comfortable having that, so you may, because you do it for seniors, you do it for this, have one you do. But you're right. I mean, I think that, the tenant is actually being referred from the caseworker initially. So, and the caseworker is the one coming to terms. But if there's a comfort level that comes from a designation on the form, we'll get an answer. We'll talk about that internally. And, maybe that can be part of the lease just to make sure everyone has a comfort level.
Sure. We are involved with a few other programs similar, and generally speaking, the residents' cooperation with rules, all that, their funding is contingent upon that cooperation. Is this program to where if a resident is not cooperating or goes through an eviction, are they at risk of losing the availability to receive funds or not?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a rental assistance. If they're not renting anywhere, we can't assist them.
Okay.
But where you move them from property to property and let them keep their subsidy is what I think
Yeah,
that's.
typically, that's a huge piece for us is if the resident knows that they can't go to another property, if they're evicted, then they are basically banned, disqualified from this program. And I think that's a huge leverage piece for us as property managers.
And we counsel a Section 8 voucher for a call. They don't let them take that somewhere else.
I don't know the answer to this, Mary.
I don't know specifically. My guess would be, the support providers are evaluating these people. That's not a fail-safe. So if they see that this person is not able to successfully live in a community independently, then I would think that they would think twice before putting them on the same subsidy and refer them to the next.
I haven't heard anything about a specific bar. We talk a lot about recirculating tenants that have failed. What do we have to do to restabilize them? You have some people that have to go back in a hospital for a period of time. So I don't think I've seen a policy that answers your question directly. So I think that's one that we need to get some more information on as to whether there might be a tenant that doesn't work in your property that, a year from now, maybe they come back to your property. So let us find that answer out.
Any other questions?
I kind of have a question. We check tenant landlord references, so if we have to reasonably accommodate them because of, mental misdemeanors, do we have to reasonably accommodate them if they have a horrible tenant landlord reference?
I don't think it's a horrible tenant landlord reference, but I do think, for the most part, they're not paying the rent. So I think the reasonable accommodations applies to that as well. If you do have a mental illness and you've lost your job and as a result you're evicted, I think there's a reasonable argument that some of that may be the result of your mental illness. If there's 10 evictions on there, hopefully we'll be catching those firsthand. We want this program to be successful from the get-go as well. I imagine that as we do the criminal background checks and the civil, we'll have discussions internally as we put people on the waiting list as to how we handle those situations. I don't know if there'll be one right answer for that.
Well,
Are these singles and families or just singles, or just families?
I think both.
They can be both?
I think most
Okay.
people are probably single, but not all of them.
Right.
I mean, there are some families, so again, that's part of the match problem.
Head of household is the disabled person.
Right.
Okay.
So we've talked to some folks, and we're considering the best way to be able to send out educational information if there's interest in attending classes. You're not going to be the person support provider. We think that our property managers are all professional and want the best for their properties and want the best for their tenants, and that's really the key to having this be successful and to be willing to communicate with the support providers. If there's additional information that you're interested in, or if your owner feels like it's important for you to have that, Mental Health First Aid offers a program. We've talked to them. We're not sure if we're going to put something together through here that folks can come to. The local support providers are also have training programs and have information that they can share with you if you're interested in getting more information about some of the best practices with folks with some disabilities. And then this is our website, which again should be live hopefully in the next day or so, and there'll be all sorts of resources on it. There's also links that go directly to DBHDD and to MFP. As we get your RAC process, the tenant selection plans will be up there. Hopefully as much information as you could want will be up there, but if there's something that you need and you don't see it up there and you feel like that's something that people are going to want to be able to refer to, let us know and we'll see if we can't get it posted for you.
This right here, I mean, it's not required, but I'm going to tell you, Vanessa Adams, who was our portfolio manager right before she passed last year, took that course. And she said it was really a great course. She said not just for this program, but for property managers to handle situations with tenants. You know, they talked about things like, you know, if you do have a situation with a tenant, how do you kind of quiet the situation? You know, what are the different tactics that you can use if somebody does act up or there's a problem? But she said this was a whole lot more than she had thought it was, just in terms of dealing with people, because in this day and age, if you put 100 people in a room, regardless of 811, you run into tenant problems, behavior problems, and different issues as a property manager. So it's just a great resource for property managers to think about taking. And so you've taken that course too, right? Yeah. Yeah, you found that was helpful.
Okay, questions? Anything at all we've talked about today?
A lot of good information.
You look like
Are you gonna offer the ability for future questions, kind of like the way you do on the QAP or the application process? I'm thinking that might be a good way to capture kind of global information, is that if you take a series of questions and then you issue back an answer and post it on your website.
We're going to go through the questions that we got in today and do a Q&A, and we'll post that. And we'll have, when we have the website live, we'll have an address where you can send questions specifically, just so we know kind of what they're involved with and get to the right people quickly, and then we'll go ahead and just update the FAQ.
It'll operate real similar to the Q&A we do with the qualified allocation plan, where you send your questions in, and then we'll try to answer them within a certain time and publish the Q and the A for everybody, so that if you can look back if you have a problem and see if maybe we've answered that question already. I think that's worked well in our on the development side of answering questions.
Mm-hmm. With the lease, as far as like late fees and like notices, the house rules cannot override that HUD lease, correct? Okay. And then I think it also it has 50059, the HUD certification listed on there. So is that required?
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Abby?
No, good. I'm just thinking about that HUD rule about, somebody damages your apartment and say they owe you $1,500. they only are required to make a payment of, what is the amount? It's ridiculously low amount. Is it 10% of their annual income, which might be like $2,500 a year? So they're going to pay on this for the next 50 years. Is there any kind of like, you know, can we make any kind of a claim for damages through this program?
What do you do
so
when
we
you
can
have
get paid back?
a regular tenant and you maybe get,
I mean, like bed bugs, HUD won't let us charge the tenant for bed bug treatment.
But on a regular tenant, just a regular tenant, what do you do? If
You
they
owe us
crash
for
it?
these damages,
And
and you better pay it or you're going to get evicted. Or you work out a reasonable payment plan that you think is getting the job done typically within a 6-month period of time. But HUD doesn't allow you to do that.
So if they get evicted?
Well, some of the time, some of the tenants with HUD, they'll even drop their jobs and drop income and child support and stuff to make that number go way down.
Well, it's a HUD program, so I would assume that the majority of rules for HUD are going to
It's going to
apply
be the same.
to this one. I don't know for sure. We'll get an answer on that too, but generally, it is a HUD program, so I think you're going to find a lot of similarity. Most of us deal with HUD in some way in the property.
That program you offered about mental health might be great to help us work with HUD.
So it is a demonstration program. We do like your feedback. We'll make sure that there's a way for you to get it to the right people. You can always contact one of us. I know Laurel helps us.
No. But if you do have a question before the website gets up, and you say it's going live tomorrow, honestly, you just never know. So if you go back and you think of a question, send it to Marie, send it to me, send it to Romy, send it to Pietrix right away. So we can collect all of the feedback. We got another session this afternoon. We're going to collect feedback from that, and then we'll share it with everybody that attended.
One more quick question. So we do have a 5059 on these units, correct?
Yes.
Do we're also expected to have like the tax credit paperwork as well, because we are subject to tax credit, so we will have to have the TIC and all the other information as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We'll hang around for another few minutes if you have anything you want to talk through, and look for an email blast to let you know when the website is live and get some of your answers. Thank you.
Yeah,